To aspiring authors, the traditional book publishing industry can too often feel secretive and exclusive. And I am really passionate about helping writers understand how the book publishing industry works and really revealing the inner workings so that they can put their best foot forward when they are pursuing publishing. So today I'm going to highlight the top 5 secrets about the publishing industry that most writers don't know. And hopefully this gives you a better understanding of the industry and how you can go about getting published. It's important to note that in this video, I am only talking about the major Big 5 US publishing houses, so these do not necessarily apply to indie or hybrid publishers, and that's just because my background is at the Big 5 publishing houses, which do operate a little bit differently from any other type of publishing house. If you are anywhere along the book writing or publishing journey, I recommend subscribing to my channel. I offer a lot of content with tips about the industry, about querying literary agents, and about book writing overall, so I'd love to have you around. So with that, let's dive right into the first secret that most writers don't know about the publishing industry. It is that debut authors are considered a hot commodity. A lot of writers seem to think that if they are new to the game, it is going to be much more difficult to find an agent and ultimately get published. They feel like they really have to have a track record of book sales, and they have to have kind of an established publishing platform in order to be successful. To be honest, that is really not true at all, at least in my experience. Editors and agents that I worked with were always super excited to work with debut authors. The reason is because a debut writer is really a kind of clean slate, and you can really help that writer establish a long-term career with that agent or with that publishing house. If the author has already had some book sales or already published some books, then the agent or the editor is going to have to take their prior book sales into account. And if they only sold modestly, then that can actually be a bit of a detriment. So it is not necessarily a selling point if you have published in some capacity in the past. Now, if you are a very successful self-published author with a lot of sales, that really can absolutely help you. But it's just something to keep in mind that if you are a debut author, it's really not a disadvantage. So in your query letter, I actually do recommend saying, "This is my debut novel," or "I am a debut author," so that the agent immediately knows that this is your first book project, because that really could pique their interest. The second secret that most writers don't know about the publishing industry is that agents actually often are very involved in the editorial process. This goes for both the literary agent assistants and the editorial assistants at publishing houses. Of course, these assistants do a lot of the admin duties like scheduling, working on the book contracts, helping communicate with different departments like sales and marketing, but they really do have a strong editorial role as well. They will, in many cases, also be reading alongside the literary agent or the editor that they work with. And they often offer feedback and notes to the authors as well, either through the agent or editor or directly in some cases. These assistants really offer a second point of view on the books that the literary agent is working on submitting to editors, or the book that the editor is helping to get published. So if you are an author and you eventually get traditionally published, you will likely have a pretty close relationship with the literary agent's assistant and the editorial assistant at the publishing house. You'll know them by name, you'll often communicate with them, maybe even communicate with them as much as you are communicating with your agent and your editor. So they can really be a helpful voice in the entire process, and they are also there to help you along that entire journey. The third secret about the publishing industry that I want to share is that publishers really don't expect all books to be bestsellers. This may be a shock, but it's true, and I hope that it alleviates some concerns that you might have about how many book sales your book is going to get. The business model of a Big 5 trade publisher really is to have, these hits and these really well-established best-selling authors kind of fund a lot of the revenue, which means that, those #1 New York Times bestsellers, those authors that sell series after series after series, that money is kind of flowing in, and that money can then fund other projects that maybe don't have that kind of established sales record. So what this allows is the editors at these publishing houses do have room to take some risks with the projects that they want to sign. And it's important to note that your book, when it is being pitched to a publisher by your agent, is going to be compared to realistic comparable titles in your genre. That means that not every single psychological thriller is going to be compared to Gone Girl, because realistically, it's not going to sell like Gone Girl, and that is totally okay. The agent doesn't have that expectation, the editor doesn't have that expectation, and the publisher doesn't either. So I hope that makes you feel a little bit more reassured going into the process. The fourth secret I want to talk about is that nonfiction can actually, in some cases, be a bit easier to publish. So let me give you a little bit of background context for this point. Whenever an editor at a publishing house is interested in potentially making a literary agent an offer on a book that they have submitted, they attend these editorial meetings that are really round tables. So all of the editors will sit around a table and go one by one and talk about the projects that literary agents submitted to them and which ones they're interested in. And the purpose of that meeting is to gauge the team's reaction and see what projects seem like a really good fit and just get their opinions on if it's really a good fit for that publishing imprint. So as an editorial assistant, I was privy to these meetings, and one thing that I noticed is that nonfiction projects tended to get easier support than fiction projects in some cases, and there are a few reasons for this. The first is that writers who are writing a nonfiction book are often actually experts in whatever that book is about. So for instance, if it's a book on winemaking, perhaps it is by someone who owns a winery. Because of this, the author immediately has connections and kind of different avenues to help market and ultimately sell the book, which is appealing to a publisher. So for example, that winemaker could sell their book about winemaking in the winery that they own. And that really has a built-in marketing, sales, and funnel to find the audience. It can also be a bit easier to get media coverage for these types of books. The local newspaper where that winery is located will likely want to do a story about the book that that winemaker created, and then that will funnel some sales as well. That can ultimately help the publisher get the support that they need to buy that book from a literary agent. Now, I am not suggesting that fiction writers should pivot to nonfiction because they think that that's somehow going to up their chances of getting published. I definitely don't recommend that, because you're writing fiction for a reason. That's what you're passionate about, so that is what you should put all of your efforts into. It's just worth understanding how editors and publishers think about the books that they're signing, so I did want to share that information about the nonfiction side. The last secret is that the publishing industry is a lot more than just agents and editors. You hear me talking about the agent and the editor pretty much constantly because those are the two key figures that you as the writer will interface with through your publishing journey. However, there are a lot of other professionals working behind the scenes who have a lot of influence on what gets published and how. These people include what we call literary scouts. They include foreign rights agents. They include film agents. And they include people like Reese Witherspoon, for instance, who has her Hello Sunshine book club. They include Book of the Month representatives, because those people have a lot of weight if they choose a publisher's book to feature for their Book of the Month club, for instance. So all of these people are operating behind the scenes and are honestly involved in the publishing process from that submission stage. As soon as a literary agent has a manuscript that they are presenting to publishers, that's really where these other kind of people are gonna come in and wonder what it's about. Sometimes they're gonna read the manuscript and in some cases, pitch it for film. They might pitch it for Reese's book club, things like that. They are very, very in the know. You're likely not going to speak with them as the writer, but it's interesting to know that they are working behind the scenes. So I hope that this gave you some more insight into the inner workings of the book publishing industry and some of the secrets that most people really don't know. I think having this information about how literary agencies and publishing houses operate can really help you position yourself for success when you are looking to get your book traditionally published. For more insider tips about the industry, I recommend checking out my video on common myths about the traditional publishing industry, because that also reveals some things that most people think are true but really aren't. And if you find this type of content helpful, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you around to talk all things publishing and book writing. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.